The conference room occupied the entire top floor of the Planetary Exploration Institute, a testament to humanity's ambitions written in steel and glass. Dr. Sarachin arrived 2 hours early, as she had every significant day of her career. She stood alone in the vast space, watching the city wake beneath a sky that couldn't decide between night and dawn. 20 years, 2 decades of her life compressed into this single moment. She traced her finger along the mahogany table, counting the empty chairs. 15 seats. 15 minds that would decide whether humanity's greatest dream lived or died. Her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows looked older than she felt inside. Silver threaded through her black hair now, and lines creased the corners of her eyes, evidence of too many sleepless nights spent calculating trajectories, designing habitats, planning for every possible disaster on a world 140 million miles away. She pulled out her tablet and opened the file she reviewed 1,000 times. Project Olympus, humanity's first permanent colony on Mars. The presentation was perfect. Every slide polished, every argument bulletproof, every contingency addressed. She'd spent 6 months preparing for this meeting alone, building on 2 decades of research before that. But perfection fell hollow at 5:47 a.m., standing in an empty room, waiting for judgment. Sarah walked to the western windows, where she could see her reflection more clearly in the darker glass. Behind her reflection, a photograph sat on the tablet screen. A little girl with wild curly hair and Sarah's same dark eyes, holding a crayon drawing of Mars with crude domed cities and stick-figure astronauts. Emma. Sarah's finger hovered over the screen. Then she closed the file quickly. Not now. She couldn't afford emotional vulnerability today. Today required steel, not sentiment. The elevator chimed at 6:15. Bill Nye emerged, his famous bow tie, this one decorated with tiny planets, bright against his dark suit. He carried a battered leather briefcase that looked older than some of the technology they'd be discussing. Dr. Chun, I should have known you'd be first. His handshake was firm, his smile genuine but tired. Bill Nye was 73 now, his face deeply lined, his movements more measured than in the countless science shows that had made him a household name. But his eyes still held that spark of curiosity that had inspired millions. Couldn't sleep, Sarah admitted. Neither could I. He set down his briefcase and moved to stand beside her at the window. You know what I kept thinking about last night? The Apollo 1 fire. 3 men died before we ever left the ground. Gus Grissom, Ed White, Roger Chaffee. They burned to death in a spacecraft on a launch pad during a routine test. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. That was 58 years ago. Our safety protocols are exponentially better, yes. Bill turned to face her directly. But Sarah, Mars isn't a test we can abort. Once we're there, we're committed. And the margin for error is so much smaller than anything we've attempted before. I know that. Do you? Do you really understand what you're asking people to do? His voice was gentle, but the question cut deep. I'm not trying to undermine you. I'm trying to make sure we're all clear-eyed about what this means. Before Sarah could respond, the elevator chimed again. Dr. Ellen Stofan arrived with the European Space Agency Director, Francois Beaumont. Then came Dr. James Morrison, the Cambridge climate scientist whose published critiques of Mars colonization had made him famous or infamous, depending on who you asked. Elon Musk arrived at precisely 7 a.m., flanked by 2 SpaceX engineers. Dr. Amelia Rodriguez, NASA's chief mission psychologist, came with Dr. Robert Park, Sarah's longtime colleague. One by one, they filled the room. 15 brilliant minds, 15 different agendas, 15 opinions about humanity's future. At 7:30 a.m., Bill Nye called a meeting to order. Thank you all for being here. I know you've traveled from around the world, literally. For this discussion, we're here because humanity stands at a crossroads. For the first time in our history, we have the technical capability to establish a permanent presence on another planet. The question before us isn't whether we can do it. The question is whether we should. He paused, letting the weight settle over the room. Dr. Chen has spent 20 years preparing for Mars colonization. She's assembled the most comprehensive proposal ever created. Today, we listen. We debate. and we decide. Dr. Chun, the floor is yours. Sarah stood, her hands trembling slightly as she activated the holographic display system. The lights dimmed. Above the table, Mars materialized, a perfect three-dimensional rendering of the red planet, rotating slowly, its rusty canyons and ancient volcanoes visible in stunning detail. Thank you, Bill. Thank you all. Sarah's voice started soft but gained strength. What you're looking at is humanity's next home, not a destination, not a science experiment. A home. She manipulated the display, zooming to specific regions. This is Jezero Crater. This is where we'll begin. The site offers everything we need: accessible water ice, relatively flat terrain for landing, and proximity to mineral deposits we can mine for construction materials. The hologram shifted, showing detailed architectural renderings. Underground habitats connected by pressurized tunnels. Transparent dome greenhouses. Solar panel arrays stretching across the rusty surface. A small nuclear reactor providing backup power. The first mission launches in 2031, just 6 years from now. 3 Starship vessels, carrying 33 people total, plus supplies and equipment for initial setup. They'll land at 30-day intervals, ensuring that if one mission fails, the others can still establish a foothold. She walked around the table as she spoke, making eye contact with each person. We've solved the major technical challenges. Oxygen generation from atmospheric CO2. Water extraction from subsurface ice. Food production in controlled environments. Radiation shielding using Martian regolith. Medical facilities capable of handling trauma, disease, and emergency surgery. Dr. Stofan raised her hand. What about the psychological factors? The simulation studies show concerning results. I'm glad you asked. Sarah pulled up new data. Yes, the Hawaii simulation had issues, but we've learned from that. Our crew selection process is rigorous. We're looking for specific psychological profiles. People with strong stress management skills, high adaptability, and proven ability to function in isolated environments. Dr. Amelia Rodriguez leaned forward, her expression skeptical. Sarah, I've reviewed your psychological screening protocols. They're comprehensive, yes, but you're still selecting from a fundamentally flawed pool. What do you mean? I mean that the people who volunteer for one-way missions to Mars aren't necessarily the people we should send. There's often an element of escape fantasy, running from something rather than running towards something. The room grew tense. Sarah felt heat rising in her cheeks. That's a cynical view of human ambition. It's a realistic view based on decades of astronaut psychology research, Amelia countered. The original Mercury 7 astronauts? Test pilots with strong egos and something to prove. Apollo astronauts? Many were driven by Cold War nationalism and personal glory. The ISS astronauts today are the most psychologically healthy because the mission is temporary. They know they're coming home. So you're saying we can't find mentally healthy people willing to go to Mars? I'm saying we need to examine the motivations very carefully. Because Mars colonization isn't exploration anymore, it's emigration. Permanent, irreversible emigration. And the people most attracted to that option may not be the most suitable. Bill Nye interjected smoothly. Dr. Rodriguez raises valid concerns. But let's table the psychological discussion for now. Sarah, continue with your presentation. Sarah took a deep breath, recentering herself. She continued through the technical details. Life support redundancies, communication systems with a 13-minute time delay to Earth, plans for expanding the colony from 33 people to 300 within 10 years. Then came the economics. Total cost of first mission, $180 billion over 6 years. Expensive, yes, but distributed across multiple nations, it's manageable. The United States spent $2.2 trillion on the Afghanistan war. Surely humanity's future is worth a fraction of that. Dr. Morrison's hand shot up. His gray beard quivered with barely contained frustration. May I respond? Sarah nodded reluctantly. Morrison stood, his tall frame unfolding slowly. Dr. Chen's presentation is technically impressive, but it exists in a vacuum. Pun intended. Let's talk about the real world. The world down there. He pointed toward the windows, toward the city below. Right now, as we sit in this comfortable room, the Arctic is melting at unprecedented rates. We've lost 13% of Arctic sea ice per decade since the 1970s. The Greenland ice sheet is losing 280 billion tons of ice annually. Antarctic ice loss has tripled in the last decade. He pulled up his own holographic display. Graphs showing atmospheric CO2 levels, global temperature increases, sea level rise projections. Coral reefs are dying. The Great Barrier Reef has experienced 4 mass bleaching events in 7 years. The Amazon rainforest, which produces 20% of the world's oxygen, is approaching a tipping point where it could transform into savanna. We're in the middle of the 6th mass extinction event. Species are disappearing at 1,000 times the natural rate. His voice grew more intense. And Dr. Chin wants to spend $180 billion. That's a low estimate. By the way, real costs will likely triple to make a dead planet habitable while our living planet dies around us. The room erupted in murmurs. Sarah felt her carefully constructed composure cracking. Dr. Morrison, that's a false dichotomy. Is it? Every dollar has an opportunity cost. $180 billion could fund massive renewable energy deployment. It could restore forests, protect ecosystems, build climate-resilient infrastructure for vulnerable populations. Instead, we're fantasizing about Mars while children in Bangladesh lose their homes to rising seas, while farmers in California watch their crops wither, while Pacific Island nations literally disappear underwater. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. With respect, you're ignoring existential risks. What happens when the next asteroid comes? What happens if Yellowstone erupts? What happens if our political systems collapse into global nuclear war? What if? Morrison shot back. We're chasing hypothetical disasters while ignoring the real disaster happening right now. Climate change isn't a maybe. It's not a future threat. It's killing people today. Which is exactly why we need a backup plan. Sarah's voice rose despite herself. Earth's problems are real, but they're not mutually exclusive with Mars colonization. The technologies we develop for Mars, closed-loop life support, ultra-efficient solar panels, advanced water recycling, they all have Earth applications. In theory, Dr. Stofan interjected, but in practice, Mars technology is too expensive for widespread terrestrial use. The water recycling system on the ISS costs millions of dollars. How does that help a village in sub-Saharan Africa? Elon Musk finally spoke, his voice cutting through the rising tension. You're all thinking too small. Mars isn't about Earth versus Mars. It's about becoming a multi-planetary species. It's about survival on a cosmic timescale. Spoken like someone with $200 billion to throw around, Dr. Morrison muttered, spoken like someone who understands that single-point failures are catastrophic. Musk countered, Earth is a single point of failure for humanity. One asteroid, one supervolcano, one engineered pandemic, and we're extinct. Forever. Gone. Every human achievement, every work of art, every scientific discovery, erased. And Mars prevents that how? Morrison challenged. A colony of 300 people with limited genetic diversity, completely dependent on Earth for supplies and support? That's not species survival. That's a very expensive outpost that dies the moment Earth stops sending shipments. Initially, yes, Sarah jumped in, but within 30 years, the colony becomes self-sufficient. We'll have local manufacturing, closed-loop agriculture, established mining operations. Based on what evidence? Dr. Rodriguez asked. Sarah, you're projecting technological and social developments that have never been tested. You're assuming everything goes according to plan. But nothing ever goes according to plan. Bill Nye held up his hands, calling for silence. The room gradually quieted. Let me share something, Bill said, his voice carrying that familiar warmth that had made him beloved by millions. Last year, I visited the Mars simulation habitat in Hawaii. It's called HIC's Hawaii Space Exploration Analog and Simulation. 6 researchers, living in complete isolation for 8 months in a dome on the side of Mauna Loa volcano. He walked slowly around the table as he spoke, making eye contact with each person. The dome is 1,200 square feet, about the size of a small house. 6 people. 8 months. They wore spacesuits any time they went outside. They ate freeze-dried food. They dealt with equipment malfunctions. They conducted research. Everything designed to simulate Mars as closely as possible while still being on Earth. What did you observe? Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. She'd read every report from HICs. Brilliance and fragility, Bill said. By month 2, the crew was functioning beautifully. They'd established routines, divided responsibilities, were conducting excellent research. By month 5, things were falling apart. 2 crew members stopped speaking to each other over a disagreement about resource allocation. Another developed severe depression and spent entire days in her sleeping quarters. The mission commander started making questionable decisions, possibly due to stress-induced cognitive impairment. But they completed the mission, Sarah pointed out. Barely. And Sarah, this is a critical point, they were still on Earth. They knew that if things went truly wrong, rescue was possible. They could see the ocean from their dome. They could smell the volcanic soil. They were isolated, yes, but not truly alone. On Mars, there is no rescue. There is no early termination. There's only endurance or death. The weight of those words settled over the room like physical pressure. Francois Beaumont, who had been silent until now, spoke with his thick French accent. Bill raises the central question. No, we can build the technology. We can solve the engineering challenges. But can we solve the human challenges? Can we prepare people for permanent isolation, for the psychological stress of knowing they can never return home? People have done incredible things throughout history, Sarah argued. Early humans crossed oceans in wooden boats with no knowledge of what lay ahead. Polynesian navigators found tiny islands in vast Pacific expanses. Antarctic explorers survived years in brutal conditions. Humans are adaptable. Those explorers could always come home. Amelia interrupted quietly. That's the difference. Even the most isolated Antarctic expedition knew they'd eventually return to civilization. Mars colonists don't have that psychological safety net. Sarah felt frustration building in her chest like steam in a pressure cooker. So what are you saying? That we should never attempt anything permanent? That we should only explore places we can easily return from? I'm saying we need to be honest about the psychological costs, Amelia responded. I've evaluated 347 Mars mission candidates over the past 8 years. Do you want to know what I found? I have a feeling you're going to tell me whether I want to know or not. Amelia's dark eyes fixed on Sarah with uncomfortable intensity. 43% were running from failed relationships. 27% had experienced significant career setbacks and saw Mars as a fresh start. 18% had lost someone close to them and were seeking purpose. 8% showed signs of suicidal ideation, disguised as adventurous spirit. Only 4%, Sarah, were primarily motivated by scientific curiosity and genuine desire to build something new. The room fell silent. Sarah's mouth went dry. That doesn't mean they're unqualified, she managed, doesn't it? Amelia leaned forward. Sarah, you're a brilliant scientist. Your Mars architecture is ingenious. Your engineering solutions are elegant. But you're making the same mistake every Mars enthusiast makes. You're assuming that technical competence equals mission success. It doesn't. Psychology matters as much as engineering, possibly more. So screen more carefully. Develop better psychological evaluations. We have. And you know what happens? The candidates learn to game the tests. They know what answers we want to hear. They present their best selves during evaluations, then reveal their true psychological vulnerabilities after selection. Bill Nye moved to the center of the room. Amelia, you're outlining serious concerns. But let me play devil's advocate. Couldn't we argue that some psychological complexity, even pain, might make someone more suited to Mars? That someone who's experienced loss understands resilience? That someone seeking a fresh start might be more committed to making the colony succeed? Perhaps, Amelia acknowledged, but we need to examine those motivations honestly. Which brings me to my question for Dr. Chun. Sarah felt ice slide down her spine. She knew what was coming. Somehow, she'd always known this moment would arrive. Why do you want to go to Mars, Sarah? The question hung in the air like a knife suspended by an invisible thread. I've spent 20 years. That's not an answer. That's a resume. I'm asking about motivation. What drives you? What makes you willing to leave Earth forever? Sarah's throat constricted. Around the table, 15 faces watched her with varying degrees of sympathy, skepticism, and curiosity. I want to advance human knowledge. To secure our species' future. Your daughter died 5 years ago. The words detonated like a bomb in the silent room. Sarah felt the world tilt sideways, her vision tunneling to a pinpoint focused on Amelia's face. That has nothing to do with Emma-chan, age 9, acute lymphoblastic leukemia. She died on March 17, 2020, after 18 months of treatment. You took a 6-month leave from your work, then returned and increased your Mars colonization efforts threefold. You've written 42 papers on Mars architecture in the 5 years since her death, compared to 23 in the 15 years before. Sarah's hands trembled. She gripped the table edge to steady herself. How dare you? I dare because this matters, Amelia said, her voice gentle now but unyielding. Because if the lead architect of Mars colonization is driven by unprocessed grief, we need to know. Because if half our colonists are running from pain rather than toward purpose, the mission will fail. Tears burned behind Sarah's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not now. My daughter loved space, Sarah whispered. She wanted to be an astronaut. From the time she was 4 years old, she talked about going to Mars. She drew pictures. Cities with glass domes, parks with red soil, children playing in lower gravity. She died dreaming of stars she'd never reach. The room felt too small, the air too thin. Sarah's chest constricted. And you think going to Mars honors her memory? Amelia asked softly. I think giving up on Mars betrays everything she believed in. Sarah's voice cracked. She believed humans belonged among the stars. She believed we could build impossible things. She believed in wonder and possibility and reaching beyond what we know into what we might become. Bill Nye stood and moved to Sarah's side. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Sarah, I lost my mother to ovarian cancer when I was 42. I understand grief. I understand the desperate need to find meaning in loss, to make it matter somehow. But we can't build humanity's future on foundations of pain. We have to be clear-eyed about our motivations. He addressed the room. This is why we're having this meeting. Not just to evaluate technical feasibility, but to examine the deeper questions. Why are we really doing this? What are we hoping to achieve? And are those hopes realistic, or are they grief fantasies we're projecting onto a red planet that doesn't care about our needs? Dr. Robert Park, Sarah's colleague, spoke up for the first time. I've worked with Sarah for 12 years. I was there before Emma's diagnosis, and after her death, I've watched this evolution. And yes, Sarah's motivation is partially rooted in grief. But isn't all great human achievement rooted in some kind of pain? Don't we build cathedrals to cope with mortality? Don't we write poetry to process loss? Don't we explore to escape the limitations that bind us? There's a difference, Dr. Morrison interjected, between channeling grief into creation and letting grief drive life or death decisions for hundreds of people. Is there? Robert challenged. Or is that just your judgment about what constitutes valid motivation? The debate spiraled into arguments about psychology, motivation, and the nature of human ambition. Bill Nye let it run for 20 minutes before calling for order. We're losing focus, he said. Let me propose something different. Let's stop debating abstractions and talk specifics. Sarah, walk us through day 1. 100 people land on Mars. What happens? Sarah took a deep breath, grateful for the concrete question. She pulled herself together, wiping her eyes quickly. The landing site is pre-prepared. We've sent cargo missions over the previous 4 years. Robotic systems that have been manufacturing fuel from atmospheric CO2, extracting water from subsurface ice, building basic habitats, testing life support systems. When the first crew arrives, they're landing at a functional base, not starting from scratch. She manipulated the hologram, showing the timeline. Ship 1 lands with 11 people, 2 pilots, 3 engineers, 2 doctors, 2 biologists, a geologist, and a mission commander. Their first priority is confirming all systems are operational. They conduct detailed inspections of habitats, life support, power generation, water processing. First 72 hours are critical. If anything major is wrong, they still have time to abort and return to Earth. And if something goes wrong after 72 hours, Dr. Stofan asked, then they're committed to staying until the next launch window, 18 months later. But we've designed massive redundancy into every system. If one habitat fails, there are 2 backups. If one water processor breaks, there are 3 others. If one person becomes incapacitated, others are cross-trained in their essential skills. What about medical emergencies? Amelia asked, what happens when someone needs treatment you don't have supplies or equipment for? Sarah hesitated. This was a question she'd hoped to avoid. We have extensive medical supplies, 2 fully equipped surgical suites, diagnostic equipment. That's not what I asked. What happens when someone develops appendicitis and the surgery goes wrong? When someone has a stroke and needs interventions you can't provide? When someone needs a blood transfusion and you don't have their type? When someone develops cancer? The room waited. We do our best, Sarah said quietly. They die, Amelia stated. Let's be honest. They die. And everyone else watches it happen, and they can't leave, can't escape, can't do anything but live with that trauma and know they might be next. People die on Earth, too, Sarah countered, her voice barely audible. But on Earth, we have options. We have specialists, advanced hospitals, experimental treatments. We have hope. On Mars, there's only what you brought with you. And when that's not enough, there's only waiting and watching someone die. The brutal honesty hung heavy in the room. Elon Musk leaned back in his chair. Everything Amelia says is true. People will die on Mars. Probably many people, especially in the early years. But people died exploring the Americas. Entire expeditions lost. People died climbing Everest. Hundreds of bodies still frozen on the mountain. People died learning to fly. The Wright brothers' competitors crashed and burned. Progress requires sacrifice. Easy to say when you're not the one being sacrificed. Dr. Morrison shot back. Easy to talk about noble deaths when you're safe on Earth, watching from millions of miles away. I plan to go to Mars, Musk said quietly. Eventually, when the colony is established. So yes, I'm asking others to take risks I'm not immediately taking. But I'm not asking anyone to do something I wouldn't ultimately do myself. How convenient that eventually might be decades away, Morrison muttered. Bill Nye raised his hands again, calling for calm. Let's push further into scenario. Year 5. The colony has grown to 200 people. Babies are being born. The first Martian natives. What does their future look like, Sarah? Sarah's expression shifted, a flicker of hope breaking through. The children born on Mars will be extraordinary. They'll grow up in 1/3 Earth gravity, which affects their bone development, muscle mass, cardiovascular systems. Their bodies will adapt. Within a few generations, they'll be physiologically distinct from Earth humans, taller, with larger lung capacity to extract more oxygen from the thin air, possibly with enhanced radiation resistance. You're talking about creating a new subspecies of humanity, Dr. Morrison said, horror creeping into his voice. Children who can never visit Earth because the gravity would literally kill them. Children who will never see an ocean, never feel rain on their skin, never breathe unfiltered air, never experience weather, never see a bird fly, never climb a real tree. You're condemning them to life in a dome and calling it progress. I'm giving them a chance to be part of something unprecedented, Sarah countered. To be the first of a new branch of humanity. To grow up building a new world instead of inheriting a dying one. Without their consent, Amelia said, these children don't choose to be born on Mars. Their parents make that choice for them. And unlike every other parental decision, this one is biologically irreversible. A child born on Mars can never become an Earth human. Every parent makes permanent choices for their children, Musk argued. where they're born, what language they speak, what culture they're raised in. This is just a more extreme version. Not just more extreme, fundamentally different, Amelia insisted. This is biological alteration that spans generations. This is creating humans who are physically prevented from accessing their species' homeworld. That's not parenting. That's playing God. Francois Beaumont interjected thoughtfully. But consider this. For children born on Mars, Earth becomes mythology. They will know their species came from the blue planet, but they will not feel its absence. Mars will be home, the only home they know. Perhaps that is not tragedy, but simply reality. My grandmother was French, but I was born in Canada. I do not mourn never living in France, because Canada is my home. That's not remotely comparable, Dr. Morrison argued. You could visit France any time. You could move there if you wanted. These children are physically trapped on Mars. Are they trapped or are they simply home? Francois countered. Perspective matters. The philosophical debate spiraled into questions of identity, belonging, and what it means to be human. Bill Nye let it continue for another 30 minutes before steering back to pragmatic concerns. Dr. Stofan raised a critical issue. Let's talk economics again. The International Space Station costs approximately $4 billion annually to maintain. A Mars colony would cost at minimum 10 times that, $40 billion per year. Probably much more in the early decades. Who pays for this? How long before the colony becomes self-sufficient? What happens if funding dries up? Then people die, Morrison said flatly, stranded on another world, watching their supplies dwindle, waiting for rescue ships that never come. It would be the greatest humanitarian disaster in history. That's why we need multiple nations involved, Musk argued. International cooperation, not just the United States. China, India, the European Union, Russia, Japan, everyone invested in humanity's future. Robert Park laughed bitterly. You mean everyone invested in their own political and economic interests. Mars becomes a proxy for Earth's conflicts. We export our wars, our nationalism, our tribalism to another planet. The Chinese section versus the American section. Resource disputes, political tensions, everything that makes Earth a mess, transported to Mars with no escape. Or, Sarah interjected, her voice stronger now, we create something truly unprecedented. A genuinely international colony where nationality matters less than survival, where we're forced to cooperate because the alternative is death, where human identity supersedes national identity because we're all equally vulnerable, equally dependent on each other. That's the optimistic view, Bill Nye said, and I appreciate optimism. But I've lived through enough history to know humans don't suddenly become better people just because the stakes are higher. We brought our prejudices to the moon. Remember the Cold War space race? We'll bring them to Mars. He pulled up a new image. Earth beautiful and blue, suspended against the black infinity of space. Here's what haunts me, Bill continued, his voice heavy with emotion. We have one known planet capable of supporting life. One. In all our searching, in all our observations of thousands of exoplanets, we found nothing else like Earth. We discovered planets with methane atmospheres, planets of solid diamond, planets where it rains molten glass. But nowhere have we found another Earth. His voice grew more intense, more passionate. And this one perfect planet, this cosmic miracle, we're systematically destroying. Our oceans are filling with plastic. There's a garbage patch in the Pacific twice the size of Texas. Our atmosphere is warming at catastrophic rates. We've increased CO2 concentration by 50% in just 150 years. We're in the middle of the sixth mass extinction event. Insects, which comprise 80% of Earth's animal biomass, are disappearing at terrifying rates. Coral reefs are dying. Rainforests are burning. Permafrost is melting and releasing methane. The Amazon is approaching a tipping point where it becomes a net carbon emitter instead of a carbon sink. He turned to face Sarah directly. And instead of fixing these problems we created, problems we understand, problems we have the technology to solve, we want to terraform Mars? We want to spend trillions of dollars making a dead planet habitable when we can't even maintain the planet that's already perfect for us? Do you see the irony? Do you see the madness? Sarah felt tears threatening again, but she fought them back. But we can do both. Going to Mars doesn't mean abandoning Earth. The technologies aren't mutually exclusive. Aren't they? Morrison stood again, his tall frame seeming to fill the room. Every dollar spent on Mars is a dollar not spent on renewable energy. Every brilliant engineer working on Martian habitats is an engineer not designing better solar panels or carbon capture systems. Every moment we spend dreaming about the red planet is a moment we're not fixing the blue one. He pulled up devastating images, drought-stricken landscapes, flooded coastal cities, bleached coral reefs like underwater graveyards, massive wildfires consuming forests. This is happening now, right now, not in some hypothetical future. Children are dying from heat waves. Farmers are losing everything to droughts. Island nations are disappearing underwater. And we're having philosophical debates about Mars. Yes. Sarah slammed her hand on the table, surprising everyone, including herself. Yes, because this is about more than just escape. This is about hope. This is about believing humanity can be more than just a species slowly cooking itself to death on a single planet. This is about proving we can think long-term, that we can build something that outlasts our immediate problems. Hope. Morrison's voice dripped with scorn. You want to talk about hope? Tell that to the farmers in Somalia facing the worst drought in 40 years. Tell that to the people in Bangladesh losing their homes to flooding. Tell that to the millions of climate refugees with nowhere to go. Your hope is their death sentence. The room erupted into chaos. Multiple people shouting. Others try to mediate, voices overlapping in confusion and passion. Bill Nye let it continue for 60 seconds, then slammed his own hand on the table with surprising force. Enough! Silence crashed down. Bill took a deep breath. We're at an impasse. Both sides have made compelling arguments. But we're going in circles, and circles don't get us anywhere. He looked around the room, at each face. Let me offer my own perspective. Not as a moderator, but as someone who spent his entire life thinking about science, exploration, and what it means to be human. Everyone leaned forward, even those who've been arguing moments before. I believe in exploration. I believe in pushing boundaries. I believe human curiosity and ambition have given us everything good about civilization. Art, science, medicine, technology. The impulse to ask what's out there has taken us from caves to cities, from stone tools to spacecraft. He paused, gathering his thoughts. But I also believe in responsibility, and wisdom, and humility. Those qualities matter as much as curiosity and ambition. He looked directly at Sarah. Your passion is admirable. Your technical expertise is beyond question. Your vision is inspiring. But Sarah, passion and expertise aren't enough. We need wisdom. We need to ask not just can we do this, but should we do this? And maybe more importantly, are we ready to do this? Sarah felt something crack inside her chest, like ice breaking. So what's your answer, Bill? After everything, what do you think? Should we go to Mars? He was quiet for a long moment, looking out the windows at the city below, at the blue sky beyond. I think we should go to Mars. But not yet. Not like this. The room erupted immediately. Protest from Mars enthusiasts. Vindication from Earth First advocates. Bill raised his voice again. Hear me out. Quiet returned gradually. We should go to Mars. Yes, absolutely. Humans belong among the stars. I believe that with every fiber of my being. But we need to earn it first. We need to prove we're worthy of that responsibility. He gestured to the Earth hologram. Mars should be our reward, not our escape, not our backup plan made in desperation, while our real home burns. We should go to Mars from a position of strength and wisdom, not weakness and fear. His voice became gentler, but no less firm. First, we need to prove we can take care of Earth. We need to demonstrate we can solve climate change. We need to show we can create truly sustainable societies. We need to prove we can cooperate across national boundaries, across political ideologies, across all the divisions that make us human, but don't have to make us destructive. Sarah felt the words like physical blows.